right, and welcome back to Get Real with Jack and Cindy. I am Cindy Morrison.
And I am Jack Wallace. Welcome, everybody. We're glad you're here.
We are glad you're here.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go, people are asking me about the NAR settlement. So
It's kind of insanity. It really is.
It's the elephant in the room, and yet all these rumors.
Which I think it makes sense because everybody is so obsessed with our business. I mean, it is
selling Sunset, buying Beverly Hills.
And I think that I think we as a business, and I think that the social media and all of these shows have made it overly glamorized, and they've also actually made it where it looks like everyone who does real estate is just rolling in money. And it's
I pulled up in my Lamborghini. I don't know what you pulled up in. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I do have a nice car. I do like my car, but
we spend a lot of time in our cars,
and it's older. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to even necessarily apologize for that, but I think that it's like, it's so easy to get caught up in the making yourself look successful and showing people that, and I think that's what happens. I think people try to show that they're successful and give the impression that they are trustworthy and they are good professionals, and it comes across sometimes as a little bit showy and kind of like rubbing it in people's faces. So I think there's some of that going on, and I think we have some blame in that as a profession. I do think we do, but it has become so interesting. And I think the problem I have with it is that, first of all, it is not a done deal.
Right.
It's a proposal, and that what they're proposing and what everybody is saying is actually what it is are two different things.
We should do a call-in show. If you have a crystal ball and you know exactly what's going to happen, call in.
Absolutely, because I think we all, I even honestly, Cindy and I talked about this, and my first thought was, let's not discuss something that isn't law. I mean, it's nothing that we really can discuss with any kind of accuracy because, again, it's proposal. But because of the fact that the discussion is so out there, it is so prevalent, I do think we should weigh in on some of the things that we're hearing.
Okay, so for those of you who have absolutely no clue what's been going on,
if you've been living on Mars,
I was going to say, I'm going to have you crawl out from under your rock, and we'll talk about this. So there was a big lawsuit, and you can help me walk through this because there's a lot of legal, and we want to make it as simple as possible. But there was a lawsuit that originated out of Kansas City, Missouri, of sellers who did not think that they should pay the commission for both the sellers and the buyers, which traditionally has been real estate as a whole. That has continued to snowball. Some of the real estate brokerages that were involved have settled. And just a couple of weeks ago, the National Association of REALTORs settled as well. $480 million, I think. So we're right around in there. Okay. Don't quote me. But close. And I mean, everybody lost their minds. Everybody's quitting real estate. Why would you sell your house? Sellers are never going to pay commission for both sides again.
I will say, as professionals in the business and having been in it for a really long time, I think it's an unfortunate timing for a lot of people right now that have been struggling in real estate to make it and to keep things going, that have been some really good assets to our business. And it's been a really rough period. It's been a really tough time. And so then to feel like you're struggling already and then just sort of feeling beaten up by you don't deserve to get paid. I think a lot of people are in panic mode. I think some people are in emotional distress because it feels very personal. I mean, I think, we were talking before we came on here about during the pandemic and slightly after, whenever the market was so brutal for buyers and buyers agents, and a lot of, all buyers agents, but especially the ones that were really trying to get their business going and were driving people around all weekend. They would see every house that was available. Then it was a bidding situation. So at the end of the weekend on Saturday at 5, let's say, then everyone would take everyone's highest and best, and they would look at them, and then they would decide which one they would take, and they would make that decision. Great for the sellers who wouldn't be, who wouldn't want to do that. That's
It was
the
driving up the
appropriate
price for
way.
them.
Absolutely. And that's what, was kind of the standard. Well, the buyer's agent, first of all, would have to deal with the sadness and upset of the buyers yet again not getting a house. That is a lot more stress than people think, because you'd care. We really, really do care, and we want people to get what they want. But then the process started all over. Because almost every house that they had looked at was a second and third backup, was also in a bidding process,
Yeah.
and that was gone. So it was almost like then you have to start on Monday digging and networking and finding the houses that were coming up. Then you go till then the next weekend and you do the same thing. And I had young realtors, and I mean young to our business, not necessarily young, but newer realtors in the office crying because this was like the 6th or 7th week that they had gone out with people, and then the people gave up. They were just, "I can't do this. This is too much. I don't."
Which the bottom line means that buyer's agent makes no money.
Yeah.
They volunteered their time. They're working as a licensed professional, but then the deal doesn't work out with my buyer who was highlighted on first time buyer on Hulu.
Right.
It was her 11th contract, our 11th contract, and she almost gave up right before that. And I said, just hang on a little longer. We changed our strategy. We found her a house. But, she was frustrated and I was frustrated for her. But I had to realize I may or may not be able to get her a home. And that's just part of what we do.
And we just literally, that was just how long ago? Not very long
Not
ago.
very long
So we
ago.
went from that to where then the market just crashed because interest rates just went outrageously high compared to where they'd been. Not outrageously high historically. So I think that that will even out and people will have to sort of come to terms with that a little bit more, and they will come down maybe a little bit. But we went from that market to this market. So these poor agents who were buyers agents who couldn't get things to go, or they got a little bit, and then right after that, then they couldn't get a sell because no one was buying. So it's been difficult times for a lot of buyers agents. So I'm more of a listing agent. That's more what I have worked my life into and been here long enough. That's more what I do. I still do buyers. I love doing buyer. That's it's fun. It's a good fun way for me to get out there and see houses and understand the market. But in general, I'm mostly a listing agent.
And I am as well. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I think you and I both always said is, listings to live.
Yeah.
Because if
definitely
you
the
have
goal.
the listing, chances are it is going to sell. You are going to make a commission. If you have a buyer, they may always get beaten out. They may decide they don't want to buy anymore. So listings
you
are very
have
important.
and you have the multi-list system, the MLS. All of those buyers agents can bring buyers to you. And so as a listing agent, you have your listing, but you have all these people with their potential buyers who can bring to you. And that's where the MLS, the multi-list system, has worked so well. So the proposal states that we will not be able to put what buyer compensation is on the MLS. That's the biggest thing. It's not that the buyer's agent will not be compensated, that there won't be payment. It's that it will not be advertised or recorded on the multiple list service.
So let's talk about why that is important for a seller and a buyer. Or has been, as far as and everything is status quo right now. This has not been approved by a
Right.
judge.
Right.
It is just the proposed settlement. But how this has worked in the past, if you have a listing
Mhm.
and you work out what the compensation is going to be for the two agents involved,
Mhm.
then you put that piece of property on the MLS,
Mhm.
And all licensed agents are then able to go on, see the property, find properties that their clients might like. But also, I know going in, I'm going to make 1%, I'm going to make 3%, whatever it is that you've already negotiated for me. But the reason why that is, I think, important to the seller is because you have those buyer's agents who are out there who now are going to potentially bring you a buyer because they can see it on MLS.
Yes. So all of that is true. Let's back just a little bit up
Okay.
and talk about, first of all, I've been in the business long enough that I love, it's like telling people why I quit design because the internet came around, right? But that's the truth.
Did the car start in this? No,
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
But the internet changed the design business dramatically because
Yeah.
what we were selling was, I could tell you, oh, this fabric will go with this, blah, blah, blah. And then I could source those things because market, I'd gone to market and I had built accounts that you couldn't have. Well, then the internet came and people could go online and they could find either that or something similar to that. So they could kind of use you by the hour and then go and find the material or the wallpaper or the furniture, in their mind, cheaper.
Especially now with Amazon and Wayfair and all of that.
Absolutely. And so it made it much more difficult for people like me to make a decent living doing interior design. So that is part of the reason why I went back into real estate, because it just worked better for me in that respect. Now, let's also talk about the fact that the MLS has been sort of created because agents like you and I pay a lot of money,
A lot of money.
to keep that going, because that is how we do our work. It was set up to be a way for us as professionals to go in, find a house that we could sell, like you said, a listing, and the multiple listing service. That was the whole function of it. And then it was hijacked. I'm just going to be honest. It was
Yes.
hijacked.
Perfect.
And
Yep.
it was taken over, and in many ways it did the public a real service, because now you can go and you can search properties day and night. You get them as quick as we do as far as them coming on.
And by hijacked, he means it's on MLS. Again, what we have paid for, what we've entered, but it is scraped. The information is scraped by Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin, Homes.com. All of those then make that information available to the public, which is great because sometimes I may miss a property and my client calls me and says,
Absolutely.
I found this property on Zillow. Let's go look at
There's
it.
a lot of good to it.
That just happened 2 days ago. A property I just didn't see it. She saw it on Zillow probably 30 minutes before I would have. We went and saw it, got in a contract, and beat out several other people.
Absolutely.
So it does that good service.
The problem is that they started taking that information and then trying to sell it back to us, or try to up pricing for us. It's been a very interesting dilemma for realtors because of the way that information has been taken and used against us, or tried to repackage it. And so it's really created an issue. So in one respect, there's a part of me that is not upset by what we're talking about, because it will make it actually less appealing for some of those, the way that they are structured, their business is structured. And I think in some ways that will help. However, what I could also see happening, which is what happens in Manhattan, in New York City, they're not a member of NAR and they don't have an MLS.
Which I didn't know until you told me that. I mean,
Yeah.
you have a dear friend that lives there. I had no idea. I thought all real estate professionals were members of NAR and were part of the MLS.
And I don't know why they have chosen to not do that, but they have not. And so, you go to the company and you look at their website, and then, it's a very different structure, which we could end up getting back to, because if we don't have a reason to have MLS that we used to have, then it might go that it goes to just websites instead of having that. So, then does that end up hurting the public? Does it help the public? I don't know. I mean, that gets confusing. But when I started in real estate, it was structured the way they're talking about. You got a book every 2 weeks. It was literally a book, and you weren't allowed to have what was being paid. So when you would set up the showing, you would ask what the compensation was.
So basically how it is now, the buyer's agent knows what their compensation is going to
Mhm.
be, because it's on MLS. But they're saying, no, you can no longer, the
Mhm.
proposed settlement, that you can no longer have it on MLS. So it goes back to the 80s where,
Mhm.
in my opinion,
Yeah.
having
No, I agree. I think
coming from journalism and, trying to be as transparent as possible, you're now going to have buyers and sellers agents negotiating behind the scenes of what that compensation is going to be like before the seller ever could possibly even get a contract.
I think it's even one step further than that, because what we do now is basically, we as a listing brokerage, we say what the percentage is with the client. We determine what the best percentage is
Mhm.
to keep as much money on the table as you can for the seller,
Right?
but in the same respect, you're putting enough money in compensation out there that I can provide really good advertising and service, and and expertise, and that the buying agent will say, if I'm going to go show houses and I'm going to show this house and this house, do I want to walk through a door that's going to pay me this amount of money, or do I want to walk through a door that's going to pay me this amount of money? I mean, I think you have to be competitive,
Mhm.
because there is that choice. The one thing that the internet has done is actually help bring those prices down,
Mhm.
because the people are on the internet and they're telling us where they want to go look.
Mhm.
We're not we're not sending houses. So it's actually, back whenever it was that way, it was 3.5% most of the time.
Yeah.
3.5 and 3.5. So everyone wants to believe this is going to be so good for everybody, and maybe it will be. But it leaves negotiation open that has not really been negotiable, because before it was the brokerage, and then if I'm the buying agent, I would have to call. If I didn't like the amount that was being offered,
Mhm.
I would have to negotiate that with the broker, and usually take it out of some of their money, and they could do it or not do it. But we weren't allowed to go. We were not allowed, as buyers agents, we were not allowed to go directly to the seller and ask that. But the verbiage that they're talking about is saying, we negotiate as buyers brokers with the seller.
Which, yeah,
That's very different.
and so you also have, you've got the buyer's agent that is supposed to, as we signed with all of our ethics
Mhm.
stuff and through our license, we're supposed to make sure and treat everyone fairly. But
Mhm.
we're there representing the seller if we're the listing agent. And as a buyer's agent, we're representing the buyer for their best interest. There are even some states, not Oklahoma, but where you can't have dual representation.
Right. Oh, it's going to upend a
So
lot of things, and I don't have a problem with dual
I
representation,
don't either.
because of the fact that I'm going to treat both parties fairly, and I don't ever want to try to gig somebody against another person,
Mhm.
and I'm never going to do something that's not ethical to begin with. So I can see where we could get to a place where maybe if the listing agent is handling both sides, that there's a little bit of a change in how that's compensated, and that's fine. We're going to get where we're going to get. The problem I see, though, is what they're talking about right now. A lot of buyers are going to say, I can't afford to pay the 3%.
I
I'm not going to have
completely agree.
representation. So you have representation, and I'm just going to do it on my own. That's sort of like that's sort of like going through a divorce with your ex having incredible representation, and you saying, well, I'm just going to represent myself.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have one attorney representing both the husband and wife, or man and woman, or however you want to do that, but if you have whatever that is, if you have both parties being represented, you can get good representation, and that can be a fair trade. But if you have one side who's being legally represented by somebody who their job is to
And
be
they do it
that,
every day.
and they do it every day, and
Mhm.
they have, I don't see this working out well. And the other thing, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit emotional, but this is so personal to me. I believe we do such good for the world with what we do. I think that the biggest investment people make is their home.
Yep.
And so it scares me to death to think that we could be throwing people to the wolves by saying, well, we don't want to pay for it, so good luck. And guess what? This whole thing is being completely misrepresented. I can't even say it.
Misrepresented.
Thank you. This has all been
that misrepresented.
See, it's been that because the buyers are the one who bring the money.
Yeah.
They bring the money.
They pay for the house.
I mean, the sellers seem to think that they're the ones who are the ones with the money, but the reality is they have the money once the buyers bring it. So,
and if a buyer's agent or a buyer doesn't show up, guess what? Zero money.
Zero
You have
money.
the equity in your house.
And so
That's all you got.
So there's a lot of parts of this that I think are being skewed. I think right now they're trying to make it sound like that the buyers are getting this break. And whenever they really realize this, the other thing too, we're going to have that age issue that we're having in so many aspects where the younger people feel like they're getting taken advantage of by the older generation. And I think they're going to look at this as you guys got this every time you bought and sold a house. And now you are at the end and you're selling your house and you want us to pay for instead of what you got. I think that's gonna, and it's a fair argument.
It's absolutely a fair argument, and I also think that you have housing prices have never been higher, so you have people that are stretched so thin as buyers to come up with their down payment, which no longer is 20%. I mean, depends on your loan and your credit score and all those things, but you can pay less than 20%, but they're struggling to come up with that. They're struggling to come up with their closing costs and pay more for a house than they ever have in history. So you're now asking people as a buyer, if it comes down to this, I also need you to come up with extra compensation for your legal representation, to go back to what you were talking about, or have it. Sorry. And maybe there's some things that maybe sellers out there can offer. We're going to pay for your closing costs, but to offset that, they wouldn't have to bring that cash. But it really worries me that people who are struggling to get by in this economy may not have that representation that they deserve and they have always had in the past. And if you're looking at first-time home buyers who have never done this before, buying the most expensive thing they've ever bought, you have no idea what can go wrong between putting in your contract and the close. And you don't have that help if they are going to say you have to pay for it.
And I agree with that 100%. I think the other side of it, though, is that then people are saying it's almost as if when you get older, you get more savvy. And so you don't need representation second, third, and fourth time. Honestly, I don't agree with that because I think that you're getting into more complicated properties, more complicated structuring. Can you pick up the phone and get the closer to answer your questions like that? Can you pull the forms and the documents that need to be pulled? Do you know what addendum or how the addendum needs to be written? Or do you have to call an attorney and wait for them to get back to you? I mean, we get things done quickly because this is what we do all the time. And I think it's going to end up being the same. I think it's going to be the same.
I think so too, because they're also going to have to rewrite a lot of the contracts. You're talking about, our veterans. It says in the VA contract they don't pay a commission. Same thing with Native Americans. There are government loan contracts that say you're not going to pay that commission. Well, are they going to rewrite all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's opening up so many things, and maybe those things need to be opened up. I'm okay with it if we can find a more efficient way, and if people feel more satisfied, I'm okay with that. But it's kind of like you and I both studied AI early on because we believe it can do so much for our profession, and we're not intimidated by it taking over and destroying our profession. I think a lot of people now are under the impression that because we have AI and we have the internet, it's kind of like I was saying earlier with whenever the interior design business changed like it did. But all of that stuff now, the technology that has been in real estate for a long time, and it still hasn't taken over. I mean, there's been a lot of people that have tried. You need to go and walk through a house. You need to be able to physically see it. You need to inspect it. You need to know how to do all that stuff. You need somebody who's a professional taking care of you. You need that human touch. It's kind of like the cashiers. They're even going away
Yep.
because people are stealing so much. I mean, there's certain things that have to be done by humans. And there's so many great things that AI and that the internet and that
Mhm.
all of those things can do to make it a better, more transparent transaction. So I'm confused why we're talking the way we're talking about
Oh, agents will be
taking
a
a
thing of the
yeah,
past.
I mean, you know what? And there may be a lot of people who do decide to not do this anymore. And that
But that's also because there were, I think, also a lot of homes that were selling in 20 and 21. We had a huge increase
Mhm.
in agents coming into the industry, and the market has slowed down. We've never had a market like COVID before. We've never had a market like this post COVID before.
Correct.
And so I think we're going to have some attrition through that as well. But talking about the AI part, every time somebody walks in, I have a listing, I have an open house or whatever, and they're like, well, the Zestimate says, the Zestimate is AI coming up with what it thinks your
Mhm.
house is worth according to how the homes have sold around it.
Right.
But what if you have you just put in wood floors, you just added on, and the
Mhm.
square footage is, Zillow doesn't know that, AI doesn't know that. So
It's science and art. It's absolutely
yes.
science and art. And
So while it can be
yeah.
helpful, it's not the only answer. And anybody who talks with you about AI will tell you, you never take anything AI gives you and turn around and publish that to social media, publish it in a report, because if AI doesn't know it, it's going to make it up. And you better be looking through to see what's fact and what's not.
And the biggest thing that you and I always discuss, the reason why it's important for us to be the calmest people in the room is because it is so emotional to buy and to sell your personal home. It is so emotional, and everybody feels like they're getting the raw end of the deal. And there's something about having that third party that really makes a difference.
It
It really
does.
does make a difference. So I think a lot of people will take this as a reason to try and go a different route, and that's fine. They absolutely they always have been able to. The truth is, commissions have always been negotiable.
Yeah,
They
when
always
when
have
people say,
been.
"Oh, it was a standard 6%."
Mhm.
No, 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 it
No.
hasn't been. That was always something you negotiate with. And I, as a listing agent, do depend on making a higher
Mhm.
commission because I spend so much money
Mhm.
advertising the properties.
Mhm.
So listing agent is spending money making sure getting it out there on other places, social media, newspaper, whatever they're doing videos, besides MLS, where the listing agents are spending a lot of money on gas and time trying to find them the right
But I've
house.
made adjustments based on how much business people are doing with me. I've made adjustments
Of course.
honestly based on
Yep.
situation, that
Hmm.
it's somebody started to do something and that didn't work out for them, and I've already benefited from them, and then it's like I'm going to come in and you know what I'm saying? I mean, I've
Sure.
made those adjustments because that's the right thing to do, and it was the right business thing to do for me. So, I mean, I can look through my structure, and I can tell you what normally do, what I
Mhm.
kind of, sort of feel like is a fair compensation for me and for giving out. Because the other thing too is I care very much about being a professional and doing the right thing professionally, and so
Mhm.
I don't want to ask people to work because there are some people that have through the years come in and they put you on the MLS and then they offer compensation to the buyer of $1, buyer's agent of $1 or $100.
What?
Yeah, yeah, they haven't lasted very long and they've
I
kind of
bet
come
they
and gone,
didn't.
but it puts you on MLS, and so then it makes the buyers, say they want to see the house,
Mhm.
but then you have to go and you had to work for that sometimes because you had agreed to that if you had a buyer broker, and it's kind of a and now that's gone because now you aren't agreeing to that. You're not going to have the ability to do that. So it's kind of there's some good to this. There
Mhm.
really is some good if it comes the way it's coming. And also it's only stating MLS. So there you can have the compensation on other websites. And guys, you're going to have to pay people to work for you. That's
A
just the way it is.
and you do have to pay, I heard somebody say, "Well, you just, don't want to work for free. Well,
No,
I don't. That's called a
Do
volunteer
you?
job.
Do you? I mean, and do you want to do it after hours, like, and on the weekends?
Exactly. But not only do we not want to not be paid, we can't. As real
Absolutely.
estate agents, we pay quite a bit every year for errors and omissions insurance.
Which you want us to have.
Yes, you do. And it is optional. I mean, I guess you could not get it, but anytime an agent says, should I cut this out? Absolutely not. Because you could lose your house and everything else, and if you made a mistake somewhere along the line. So that errors and omissions insurance is very important. If we do a deal where we don't make a commission or a fee, errors and omissions does not cover us.
No, it doesn't cover volunteer work.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly right.
And the truth is, I would rather go play with my dogs than work for nothing. And I mean, work for nothing isn't just working for nothing. Working for nothing is working for a much reduced fee. I mean, to me, I've done this long enough that I know my value proposition.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there may be some other people who are willing to do it for less, and you know what? God love them. If that works for them, God love them. But for me, I know that I bring to the table what I bring to the table,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's going to be compensation for that.
Mm-hmm.
I can do other things. I can go do other things at this point in my life, and so I think that's where some of the argument is coming in. For me, though, I will fight to the death to stay in this business because I do believe in this business, and it's
Me
been
too.
very good to me. And I think it can be. I've always loved this. I talk about this all the time, but I've always loved this business because it's such an opportunity for so many people that don't have a lot of other options. It's a
Maybe they didn't
great,
go to college.
right.
It's the great equalizer. You've trained to become a real estate agent. You've gotten your license.
And they can be so good
Mhm.
at real estate where they'd have a hard time finding a way to make that kind of money and that compensation anywhere else. And I feel like it's just, and they deserve it. They've earned it. I mean, they really have.
So I was at lunch with Todd the other day, and I heard the table. Occasionally you'll just hear words that you're like, "Oh, well, that's interesting." And I heard him say something about the lack of getting paid as a buyer's agent. So I turned around. Well, sure enough, it was two agents that I know from a different company. So I walked over and I was talking with them, and they both said, we're in our 60s. We've always done this. If we leave, it was really scary for them, this unknown.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because they were like, I didn't go to college. This is what I've trained for. I'm single. What does all of
I've
this
sat
mean for us?
on weekends of my life being in houses
Which
so
is
that people
maybe
can
why
come
they're
in.
single. I mean, that's
No, I mean, I
spend a
think
lot of time working.
you answer the phone until I'm not sad story, not trying to do that, but it
First world problems.
You really do. You either love being in this business or you don't, and you are able to give up a lot of things that other people don't give up,
Mhm.
and you're willing to take a chance on not, like I always say when John came back and he like, this is just like acting. I mean, I'm either broke or I'm making money or I'm having to wait tables to sustain my. I mean,
Mhm.
you're auditioning constantly. I mean, it's so. I just think it's really an interesting thing, and people have even talked about it kind of going to like in England, which is almost sort of like a socialized way that they do it. But you can wait like 4 weeks to get an appointment to see a house.
That's crazy.
I mean, I can't get people to wait 4 minutes before they want to go see a house. So I don't know. I mean, I think that supply and demand is supply and demand. We're in America,
Yeah.
and I think that it's going to all work its way out. I do. I think it's going to work its way out. And I really am hopeful that when it's all said and done, that it'll all come out in a way that really works for everybody to be more transparent.
Yeah.
I have no problem with people knowing how much I make. I mean, especially if you're paying it, you should know how much I make. I've never tried to hide that from people. And I've always, this is the way I've always looked at this and the way I think that you might want to just think about it. The reason why the seller pays the commission is because they have very few transition costs when it comes to the closing and the transaction. But the buyer is getting a loan, which is expensive to get a loan. It's expensive to put money down. It's expensive to have to put a year of your taxes and insurance and all the escrows, all the things that go along, just the points to buy down the interest rate.
Yep.
There's lots of things that they have to pay. So adding an additional 3% onto them just hasn't made sense. So that was where that logic came in, that you would pay it as the seller, the buyer would absorb that. That would allow them to go to that and into the transaction. Then when they go to sell, they did the same thing that the seller did before for that buyer. So that's been the kind of laddering up. And that's why it's been sort of a system that works. But also remember, the buyer brings the money.
Yep. Here's one logic. Here's one of the rumors, and I've heard this so many times. All of this settlement is going to bring housing prices down. Okay, so here's my thought process on that. If I go on a listing appointment and the seller says, okay, well, I'm just not going to pay the other side commission. Whatever happens with this settlement, I'm only going to pay you commission. I bet if I've shown them the comps, and I said this on KOTV Channel 6 this last week, no seller is going to say, oh, since I'm not paying that other 3%, I'll just reduce the price by 3%. It said no seller ever. So
That's so true. That is so true.
I haven't seen.
It's more about preserving the money than it is about passing it on.
Yeah. So I haven't quite. I mean, housing comps are comps, and so I haven't seen how that's going to happen. And I generally see people who are not in real estate say that. I have yet to hear anyone in real estate, or an expert, not necessarily even an agent or a broker, say that. So it'll be interesting to see. We know, like we said, the settlement has been proposed. It has not been approved yet. There are a lot of ifs, but as it is right now, it's status quo. I mean, I've had 3 listing appointments in the last week, and it's status quo with the way that it's been.
I've had 2, and they were concerned because they didn't want it to be a difficult time for them to sell.
Yep.
Because they're seeing that they feel like buyers agents are kind of, pulling back. So I think it's I think people are starting to see a little bit of both sides of it. But the other side of it too, I have a degree in business. I can tell you that the thing that brings prices down is supply and demand.
Yep.
I mean, trying to tinker with all these different things, okay. I mean, you can do all that. It's fine. But at the end of the day, having less people selling and less people helping facilitate the sell, to me, is not going to speed up how houses get sold. I mean, I think, I don't know. It's very interesting. And I think that it's sort of like there's this idea that the title company, I mean, who is going to be the person that says that, I mean, is a title company going to be negotiating the repairs?
Yeah.
Or and if that's what we're doing, tell me. I mean,
and disclosures and repairs.
Yeah.
Those are 2 of the ways you can end up, and how it works in Oklahoma, at least. If you have a disagreement, you go to mediation, which is free.
Yeah.
And that is generally what I've seen. It's either something over disclosures, that the seller didn't disclose something, or over repairs.
Right.
And so if they don't have that net to fall into, then are they going to end up in court, which could cost them a lot more money? And I've even heard somebody say, okay, well, so if we go over to this whole European idea, tell me if I'm correct about this, is so the listing agent would represent both sides. There are only 24 hours in a day, and I cannot show 10 people at 7 different properties. That is like being the chef at a cooking show, and you're expected to be at 7 different stations at the exact same time to cook 7 different meals.
But here's the thing that's even more interesting about that. They work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, with benefits,
Wait, we would get benefits and weekends off?
But I mean, it's basically like being, I mean, and that's why you could wait 4 weeks to see one house. I mean,
That's not gonna work
it's
either.
not gonna work, and it's just, I mean, that's not who we are as Americans. It's funny though, we start out, and the reason I didn't wanna do this because I know myself, and I will go, 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 and I went. I mean, all of this again is responding to rumor, and but I think it's also we're defending our profession a
Mhm.
little bit here,
Sure.
and, like, this idea that you can just cut our profession out and everything's gonna be great. Like,
Yeah.
mm-mm. I mean, it is so hard to get a house sold. It is really hard right now to get a house sold.
And for every easy, flawless one that you have, there are 10 others
Mhm.
that you went to hell and back 4 times.
If this had happened in a really easy market, I could see a little bit more of the
Mhm.
argument. And I don't see us going into an easy market anytime soon. So it's an interesting time, and it's a very interesting needle to thread to 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 talk about this. And I'm talking about what everyone else is talking about, not even what the proposal says. Because if we go by what the proposal says, if all we're doing is taking the compensation amount off of the MLS, I don't understand why that really is that big of a deal, other than maybe satisfying the judgment. But to me, if we do that, but we can still have the compensation
We go back to the
negotiated. We
1980s.
can do it, whenever
Mhm.
you schedule a showing, then you're allowed to know what your compensation would be. Okay. I mean, it's a little different way of doing it, but we can do that. If we're actually talking, if it's really talking about doing away with buyer brokers, I'm not sure how this is going to go down, but I can tell you one thing: it's going to get much harder to sell a house, and it's going to be
Yeah.
harder to get. If you've got one bidder compared to 10, think about that. If you have one bidder compared to 10, are you going to get a better price? Because
Probably
if we're
not.
taking the buyer's agents out who have all the buyers coming at you, I mean, I I don't see it. I don't see it, but I could be wrong.
And I think, and you and I talked about this quite a bit because we were like, oh, it's going to be really hard to do this podcast because there's so many questions right now.
And you can
But
go down so many rabbit holes, which
oh,
we've done.
oh yes, well, hello. Um, but this podcast is all about getting real.
Right,
So
right.
we felt like that this was something very important to talk about. I'm not quite sure
And we're
how.
really concerned. I mean,
Yeah.
we are really concerned. Not necessarily about what it's going to do to us, but what it's going to do to our business,
Hmm.
the
The
business of
business.
real
Yeah.
estate.
I can't see yet how it's going to benefit the buyers if they have to come up with the money for their
Mm.
representation. I don't understand how it's going to benefit the sellers in that when they offered that buyer broker compensation, that got them 10 bidders coming in as opposed to just one who, might or might not have seen the for sale sign out in the front yard. So, I don't know. I just,
My problem is if you want to bring housing prices down, work on bringing mortgage interest rates down
yep.
and leave the people who are working really hard and making a decent living and contributing to society and contributing to the economy alone. That's just my feeling.
Mhm.
And I think that's where our reaction is. I
Yeah.
think ultimately that's what they're trying to really do. I really do. I don't think this is n- uh, in any way trying to pull something over on us, but I
No, I
think
don't
I
think so.
think by the judgment, or not the judgment, the proposal coming out on a Friday right before, and everyone just sort of reacting, and every headline being
Kind of like the bank closing,
right.
like
Yeah, I
forever
think
at
it's
5 o'clock on a Friday leaves a lot of questions up in
yeah,
the up in the
and I think
air.
it's made a lot of people choose sides in a way that there aren't sides to be chosen. Um, but I believe in the buyer's agents. I
Mhm.
believe in what they do. For all of the buyer's agents who have worked with me on my listings, I so appreciate you, and I so will fight for you to have the ability to do this business. I would like to still be able to represent buyers and do that. I believe in it. If it comes down to it, that is a concern, but like I said, I am mostly a listing agent, so a lot of this is my side of it coming from, I want us to really make sure that we are thinking this through, and if the compensation and where we can put the compensation is the only thing that we're talking about, then we're all overreacting.
Sure.
But when the media and everywhere you turn, they're saying that the 6% is dead, which I don't know. But when they're saying
But
basically
literally,
that
they're
the
saying that,
buyer's
and
agents
it
are
was
done,
set. It was set, and 6% is gone. No
it's
and
always been
no.
negotiable. Yeah,
Always
yeah,
negotiable.
yeah.
The only, and where I'd kind of like to end this is, we'll keep getting real about,
As this really
as
comes
it
to
develops.
fruition and we know what actually we're dealing with.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
which
the
we will
one,
soon.
yeah, but the one thing we know, in fact, in July,
July,
is when they're talking
except it's our
about
government at work, so it could be 2 years.
2028. But but the only thing we're guaranteed in life is that there is going to be change.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
and when there is change, there is opportunity to benefit from that. And that's where I think it's really important as an agent, as a brokerage, you are keeping a close eye on this and seeing how you can survive and benefit with however it does change.
Absolutely. And listen, please don't jump ship. It's
Yeah.
a great profession and and the public needs us. I mean, we truly are needed. We truly do have a good purpose and we serve a really meaningful purpose in society. I mean,
We're helping people find the place where they live. I mean,
it's
you have
most
to have
people's biggest
air, water,
investment.
food, and shelter.
Amen. So that's all I got, and I hope that it's some kind of insight. If nothing else, it gives you some historical, you know, look back at where we've come from. Because I think the fact that we started this way, it's also funny because almost everything that was legal you had to do when I was in real estate when I was 18, you can't do now that I'm 58. And everything you couldn't do at 18, you have to do because of all the lawsuits. I mean, it's always been, it goes from one. So I think we're just in that sort of a cycle. But at the end of the day, the profession, I think, is going to stay. I really, honestly, I hope there's a more efficient way to do this where people can have more of a life. I mean, that would be nice if there was a way.
Are you talking about agents?
Yeah, I mean, that would be nice
We
if
have
there
no
was
life.
more. I mean, and I'm not saying that for myself. I mean, it's not. I'm saying that for like young people with families and things that like that they didn't have to necessarily sacrifice sometimes as much as they've had
Sure.
to do the job that we do and to do it in the way that like
But I
you
think
know.
sales have always been like that.
Amen.
I mean, my
Amen.
husband's been in the car business for 30,
And you got to be in
34
front of
years.
people. That's
Yep.
part of it.
And
Yeah.
so, so that is part of being in sales, being in
Right.
retail as a whole. But yeah, I mean,
If they can find a more efficient way to where that is, then great. But the truth is, I think the people who get out there and get in front of people and help and make and
and hustle.
bring deals together and
Mhm.
make things happen, you're always going to be needed.
Absolutely.
Always.
All right. So that is us getting real about a topic that we'll see where it ends up. We don't really know. And by the way, I can see on the video, my hair is doing I got a really, really messy bun on YouTube. Sorry about that, YouTubers. But for the rest of you listening to podcasts, you have no idea what I'm talking about. So that's
they'll be looking at the YouTube now. And I apologize if I went too far off track, but
No. And that's what I love about us, because it's really just how you and I would talk together.
Yeah.
And so we appreciate you guys letting us get real with you. This one
And
was a different
correct
one.
us if we are wrong.
Oh, they will.
Because I am not. I mean, honestly, I'm just going off of what I've read and what I've heard, and that's what's sad is that we're all just going off of bits and pieces of reporting. So I am in no way an expert on this subject. So if I am wrong, I apologize. And if there is a better explanation and somebody who really knows what's going on wants to come on with us
Oh yeah,
and
that would
really
be great.
explain it, we would love that. Now you
And-
need to really know what you're talking about. But
And I also think, the media has really taken a hit over this, but it's a very complicated topic that they're being thrown into to cover for that one story or that one day. And so anyway, but sound bites sell newscasts and newspapers and everything else. So anyway, we're all learning, and we'll be excited to figure out how we really get real on this topic.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
See you next time.
One.